Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nick Hill, Chair of the Climate Action Committee, and tonight we have a special meeting focused on the sustainability workshop for Pollard Middle School. We are recording the meeting, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Bro from the design team.
Thank you. This is a workshop. It's meant to be informal. We're gonna go over several different things. We appreciate being invited to share with this particular, but we're hoping that it can be a session where a lot of different ideas. We're gonna start a little bit with an overview of what Dwell in Town have been doing for people that may not know. Hopefully the recording will also be useful for people, facing this, so that's discussed here too. So we're going to start with Gabby, and then Andrea French is representing Eversource, and she will go after Abby. And we've got all the slides here, so we'll just keep Gabby's going to control the slides.
Yes.
Andrew's
Right. Thanks, Gary. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So for those who don't know me, my name is Gabby Queenan. I'm the sustainability manager for the town. I'm just gonna speak very briefly about some of our town-wide sustainability goals and prior projects, just to provide some context for the evening. But it'll be brief, so we can spend most of the time discussing. So just as a quick reminder why we're talking about sustainability in Needham, climate change is already here in our community. And that's really a driving force for a lot of the decisions that are made for both our climate policies and practices. So on the screen, I'll minimize this so you can see folks a little better. On the screen, you can see our 4 priority climate impacts in Needham. Heat waves, we saw that this summer with several days above 90 degrees, more intense precipitation events, flooding. Many will recall the August 8th, 2023 flooding event, which resulted in some catastrophic damage to homes and businesses. And then drought. We're actually in a drought right now. Folks may have seen the water restriction signs around town. So these impacts are already seen, they're being felt in our community, and that's helping to drive some of the decisions that are being made regarding what practices we choose to implement in the community. So you might be asking, how are these decisions being guided? And the town's climate action roadmap is really the key instrument to guide the decisions that are made around these 6 key focus areas that are highlighted on the screen. Our climate action roadmap was adopted by the select board back in 2024 and came together after a great deal of effort from the Climate Action Planning Committee, including staff, several of whom are in the room today. Thank you so much for your efforts. So my role as the sustainability manager is to help support the Climate Action Committee and advising and ultimately working with the select board to implement our climate action roadmap. So I've just grabbed a couple of slides from the roadmap that highlight some of the prior projects. So I'll just call out a few here briefly. So folks might not know that we already have a building in town that uses geothermal energy, and that is our Public Service Administration building that was built back in 2011. I'll also mention our wonderful solar array at the recycling and transfer station, which produces about 3.7 megawatts of electricity, so about 25% of our town's electricity. And there have been several installations on the residential front. Our Solarize campaigns that were led by Green Needham have had a tremendous impact on the residential side. I'll also mention our Sunita Williams Elementary School, which is a LEED Silver building. I think we'll talk a little bit more about LEED designation later today, but a building that achieved that rating and has a roof-mounted solar array on top of the building, 155 kilowatts. I'll also just mention that we've adopted both the stretch code and the specialized code in Needham. So energy codes that help encourage more sustainable construction, and really pushing towards more all-electric construction. There have been several projects implemented in town, both in our schools, with our streetlights that have helped to push energy efficiency as well. So there have been several considerable strides. And again, a lot of this has been led and guided by the Climate Action Planning Committee, the Climate Action Committee, working with the Select Board. So a lot of resident support has helped to drive these initiatives. So I just mentioned these to provide a little bit of history. The Pollard project presents a unique opportunity for us to look at another building in Needham, which does have an impact on our climate. So with that, I will turn it over now to Andrea to talk a little bit about Eversource and their role in this.
All right. Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Yes, so as Gabby said, my name is Andrea French. I'm an energy efficiency consultant at Eversource, and I cover municipal new construction projects for the state. So the reason we like to drop in this slide is I think people tend to think that Mass Save is its own entity, but it's actually a collaborative brand between the state utilities. We call them program administrators because Cape Light Compact is not actually a utility company. They administer it separately within like a program administrator model, I guess, is why they call them program administrators on the Cape. Even though Eversource is the electric utility for most of the Cape. So we are Needham's electric utility. And so as Eversource, we are responsible for administering your Mass Save incentive. So that's why I'm here today. And that's why I work for Eversource. Do I just say next slide when I'm ready?
Yes, please.
Okay, next slide now. So I'd like to talk to you today about why we want to decarbonize your new school. So there are incentive programs. The Massachusetts School Building Authority offers incentive programs for decarbonizing in your new schools, but as well Mass Save. Mass Save new construction projects have got to be all electric these days. That's a mandate we got from the DPU. Gas is not allowed in a new construction scenario. So if you want some Mass Save incentives for your project, you want to choose to decarbonize. There's also advancing technologies. Heat pumps and induction cooking, they rival what gas used to be able to do. They're great technologies. State and local policy. So with the direction codes are taking, the all-electric building stock is increasing in our state. And if you look around, you're going to notice that most new construction schools are going all electric. And there's more interest in building performance standards in the state than there ever has before. We have BERDO and BUTO requirements in Boston. And now there's a new statewide, it's called a large building emissions requirement, or LBER, that must be reported into. And these requirements we look at as prerequisites to potential future penalties for not being all electric. So we like to say, it makes no sense to build a building from the past. You want to look into the future. Retrofitting an existing building to decarbonize is extremely expensive. And we're here to help you do it right the first time. If you have questions, we have people on staff at Eversource that can help answer your questions. And we're excited that you're here today participating in this and thinking about this. And lastly, the reason why you'd want to decarbonize is sustainability. That's what we all know. Clean energy, clean air, and reduced emissions make safe and more productive learning environments for all. And they become buildings that everybody can feel good about and feel good in. Next slide, please. So the Mass Save programs, our flagship program, Path 1, we call it, that we encourage most schools to look at. Within that, we ask them to set an energy budget and stick to it. When we say an energy budget, we're not talking about dollars. We're talking about what's called an EUI, an energy use intensity number, or energy per square foot per year. So you set a number and it becomes a very clear energy budget and performance target. People understand it. Whole project teams can focus on it, and you can all head in the same direction. It shines a light on building operations and school policies, and it helps provide a solid target to prevent value engineering from compromising energy efficient systems and equipment. And it allows the school district to see how it's doing over time and in comparison to other schools. I also wanted to pause for a minute on the third bullet with the light bulb. Our programs encourage building operation considerations beyond just the construction period. So not only do we pay out at the construction period, like, great, you've built to your EUI, we also pay out after a year of post occupancy. We have a post occupancy period. So you get your first incentive for doing what you said you were going to do, and then you get your second incentive for following through. And this changes behaviors. This gets everybody, and it provides learning opportunities for students and staff to all understand how the building's behaving and how they participate in the EUI after a year, and hopefully sets the building up for success and to stay within its EUI target for years to come. And then finally, my last slide, please. All right, so I like to show this slide because it shows the financials. This shows first cost, so $8.3 million to put a gas system in. Ground source heat pump, you're looking at closer to 12, but look at the blue is what the customer ends up paying out. So for ground source heat pump, you're going to get tax credits in yellow, utility incentives in green. This is an example project. But this shows you that although it costs more, it's offset and you actually pay out less for making a decision on a futuristic building that instead of building sort of backwards. So I am here if anybody has any questions. I'm excited to work on this project with you all, and yeah, good luck. This is really exciting stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, back to what we're doing here. It's more informal, brainstorming, thinking about goals. A lot of you may have ideas for strategies, but really think about goals. We may consolidate tables here at some point, depending on if anyone else shows up. The idea is some tables in here working. The online group will be their own cohort, also working on it. And we'll do a presentation. So the first activity here is really something you can do asynchronously right now. It's on the tables in front of you. You can scan that in and just answer the question remotely, or you can just write it down on a piece of paper if you want it later. There are team members from the design team here too to kind of help offer a sounding board or answer some questions if there's some questions to answer, but it's really meant to be us listening to your conversations. Likewise, online, we got team members, several from RFS, mechanical engineers. Kelly is also there, who's going to act as our facilitator. And there may be others. So we've got Niles and Chad from RFS.
We've got two folks online. Would you like to have a separate breakout room for them? Yeah.
We'll do that, activities.
So we don't need a breakout room for this. This first activity is just something to gauge where you're at right now. And what your thoughts are in general about sustainability. So kind of
As individuals.
As individuals, yes, as individuals. That's more of an individualized point of view.
Yeah, you want to point out the other 19.
Sure.
Position for me, I'm a landscape architect. I'm
Colleen Soden from Soden Sustainability. I'm the assistant consultant.
Okay. And I think a lot of you already know Matt Cilios.
HMFH Architects.
HMFH Architects.
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm also from HMFH Architects.
He's helping.
With the architect team.
So we can go.
The design team to do the Mentimeter or no? I'm assuming
I
no.
don't need to.
Okay.
There's more to.
Exactly, yeah.
So anyway, so we're just sustainability in general, maybe preaching to the choir a little bit here, but for people in general, why we're doing this and why we're starting early with this is starting early has a bigger impact than starting later. We've already heard from a few people, but design decisions, incorporating them early in the process is going to have a bigger impact on what you get at the end, both in cost and in performance. Good, excellent. We're really trying to be holistic, looking at everything, because they're all all the ideas and impacts are interrelated. Our office is involved with 2030 commitments and material pledges. So this is just a graphic talking about how targets are to reduce energy consumption by a target date of 2030. And we're all trying to make that effort. Big challenge. Next slide. Materials pledge is something that we're also part of and looking at is, so sustainability is not just about energy, it's about many other things, including materials that we put into our buildings. We'll talk a little bit more about materials in another section as we're going through. Next. So an overview of project here for Needham. Right now, we're looking at a couple of different sites. And we're not trying to solve anything right now, just talking about what's there and what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of each site. So in this case, 2 sites are near each other, one on either side of the commuter rail. And see the Charles River poking out down on the bottom right, and the commuter rail splitting the whole thing. You can go to the next slide, which is zoom up each one. So again, this is just pointing out some of what's there already that you already know about, and some of the things that we're dealing with. And, you know, the existing Pollard site, as you all know, is challenging for many reasons. One is it's closer to the commuter rail, it's a steep site, and there's an existing school line already. So those are all things that the community and the team are gonna have to deal with if this is the site that's selected. Go to the next slide. The DeFazio site, sorry. Slightly different challenges. Both of them are contending with water issues on site in different ways. But we'll have to dance around that and figure out how that works on each site, depending on where the final choice is. Yeah, a little further away is rail. That's sorry, go to the next one. We also want to keep in mind that you've already done some visioning related to what the school is supposed to be doing programmatically. So these are a lot of goals that came out of the early visioning for education and facilities. And it's important to keep in mind that these are connected to the sustainability goals too. So you don't want one to preclude the other. So they want to support each other. So whatever comes out of this is meant to be supporting a lot of these goals too. Go to the next one. More goals and stuff that came out of that. So these are there for reference in the future. It's the schedule. So right now we're in that middle blue part in the community meetings. See at the bottom. So this is one of those community meetings, and it's a fairly quick process. So you feel like there's a lot of information on all sides that everyone's trying to digest and incorporate into this, and then after this phase, we move into schematic design, and there'll be subsequent sustainability workshop in that phase to start really digging into some of these strategies that support the goals out of this workshop. So you guys have a climate action plan, which is awesome. And this is a slide just talking about the efforts across the state and some of the other just requirements in general. Yeah, he's already mentioned the opt-in code, and executive order 594 is like really talking about state buildings and they need to meet energy performance standards. So the MSBA's requirements as a state agency funding projects also have to comply with that. And so it's all layered in, everything's layered in together. Some of what we know about Needham already come up. Yeah, there are a lot of good benefits in town that the sites don't necessarily connect to physically, but what people are thinking about and trying to make connections to in some ways are important and can be acknowledged in different ways through the project. Next one. And yeah, he's already mentioned some of the achievements in town. I think it's important not only to acknowledge it, but also to take any lessons learned from those that could help do something, better here or keep doing the same stuff that you were doing before. So it's important for the design team to hear from you guys to know what went on at those projects too. So MSBA funding is tied to meeting opt-in stretch energy code. So even if you weren't in an opt-in community, the state funding is for schools is being tied to that level of performance. The MSBA is also incentivizing that with an additional 3% fund. So that's a big, incentive. And I think it's something that everyone is trying to take advantage of. We have this in here in case Andrea wasn't able to speak for us, but we can just keep going. Just a quick note too, this is just some of the other incentives related to the type of technology. She mentioned the advanced technologies, so there are different levels of funding depending on what type of technology is being incorporated into the project. So there is more for ground source heat pumps, but not every project can do ground source heat pumps for a variety of reasons. So there are other incentives. So we've already talked about the utility incentives. There are separate incentives related to chargers in the state, and also had been some federally. Those have kind of disappeared right now, but they might come back. But we keep in here open for all kinds of opportunities. So some of them may disappear now, but others will come back. So anyone that's keeping tabs on that, it's important to let us know so we can take advantage of it when the timing's right. The Inflation Reduction Act, a bit modified, but still has tax credits available for ground source heat pumps. So that's another thing to consider in the mix. There could be other grants. I think you guys are familiar with some of these through your work with Charles River, like that. Sorry, people. And then just another additional funding source from the MSBA when you meet some additional credit points related to indoor air quality and materials choices. So we talked a little bit about LEED. So MSBA uses LEED as a measure of knowing that they're getting sustainable buildings. Everyone's required to certify their projects, and you have to meet a base level LEED Silver certification to get the funding. So now we're gonna break down the topics for sustainability into these focus areas. This is kind of a way to break down a little bit, make it a little more digestible, and to pull out some of the goals that you can find that are important for me. And that's what these conversations will be about as we're going forward. Go to the next slide. Go to the next one. We're going to start with equitable communities and well-being. So this is really thinking about sustainability from a social justice point of view. How is what we're doing impacting not only the occupants of the building, but others outside, adjacent to the building, and or those involved just in the pipeline of getting materials to what goes into it. So it's trying to think about everyone that's impacted by a project. So this is just some data about how much time everyone spends in a building, why it's important to be thinking about how healthy it is to actually be in the building. And as a school, it's a very important place for social and emotional development as well as knowledge. So this is an opportunity to really focus on indoor air quality and having that positive health impact on environments. So that there is a lot of benefits to these cleaner, newer buildings, reduce absenteeism, less respiratory issues. There are studies in the past that talk about more daylighting, helping with dental health, and it's just a lot of good benefits that are ancillary and that built on today's environments. As I mentioned, daylighting helps both on energy, this balancing act between too much light and overheating, so that, you know, we're still trying to balance that technological side of it, but it's still an important aspect for health and moods, what's attitudes, and psychology. And for schools, noise and sound control is very important. It's important for speech legibility, especially for young kids to be able to have an acoustically well-performing space. You don't want noise interfering from adjacent spaces, but you also want it to not be too reverberant or difficult to hear within the space itself. So we'll take a few minutes to think about equitable communities and what kind of goals, Needham, all of you might feel are relevant to that aspect of this. And I think you guys can come together a little more if you want to.
Maybe a few more people at the,
Okay, it's 8 minutes and a 2-minute breakout still for the people online.
Sorry, say that again?
8 minutes for
Yeah.
discussion and 2 minutes for reporting.
Yes, and I think
Okay.
there's
Exactly.
wrap this exercise up.
I'll be fast.
Sorry to cut people off, but what we want to do is get each table to kind of share at least their highest priority idea. And if it's similar to another table, they can pick their number 2. And you guys can keep writing them down and share them with those afterwards. We'll collect them afterwards too, but I think you want to just write a few down to see what everyone's coming up with and what they talked about. We could start with the folks online. So I don't know if Kelly's ready to maybe share what they've done.
Yeah, I can share. So what we talked about in our group, one of the first things that was brought up was the utilization of the facilities. So making this something that is welcoming for everybody, from a diverse perspective and also from the community. One big topic that we talked a lot about was lighting, how that affects not only mental health, but also the health of everybody, everybody's well-being in general. So having plenty of natural lighting and windows also is something that was brought up. Maybe having the ability to open your windows and bring in fresh air will be great for the students. And also full spectrum lighting was another topic that was brought up if natural light is not something that can be brought into the design as much. We also talked about the location of the building sites to make sure that the community has visibility of the pros and cons of both of the sites that we are considering. And we also want to think about, you know, what would be the foot traffic, what's the actual vehicular traffic that's going to be affected on either of the sites. So making sure that that's transparent. That's what we talked about.
Great.
Thanks.
There's a lot of similar things. And the table I was sitting at, I don't know if you guys want to add to this.
Well, Cameron said it all, but you know, one of the things we did start out with was that idea of, well, we started and ended with the community is an internal community within the school among the pupils, but also the networking to the neighborhoods, walking, bringing people in after hours, which is sustainable, you know, in terms of using the building fully. And honestly, the more people who aren't parents see the building, the more they're more likely to sustain it with tax dollars. So, and we also did talk about daylighting and to some degree the sound issue, but really community.
Great.
I think we said a lot of the same things. We had Pride of Place, something you could be proud of. It's a really beautiful place for people to be and welcoming to the community. Easily accessed by multiple constituents during the day, evenings, using the auditorium. It's really a community builder and a resource, not just a school. potentially a self-sustaining opportunity. Proximity to Hersey and the train maybe would make it more user-friendly and accessible for faculty, staff, and students alike to use the train and back and forth across Needham to get to the school. Maybe cut down on some of the car traffic. So all the same things about creating hubs of community for students, faculty, staff in school. And really design it purposely for that use now and to be flexible to the culture.
I think another thing that was brought up at this table was bicycles. Students at this age are using bicycles a lot. That'd be another way
Just
to.
gonna speak up, to ask folks to speak up for those online a little bit.
Sorry, so we're talking about bicycles at this table, which I think is another correlation with mass transit, how people get there and bike. So mass transit might be more how the adults get there, the staff. Bicycles are really actually going to be how a lot of kids can get here, which also can support, equal access in some ways, hopefully, and healthy activities. So that's another aspect of just connections.
Electric bikes.
So, thinking about how the building acts to the community and the proximity of things is another aspect to be just talking about, understanding how what you put on the site can help facilitate a lot of that.
Great.
Microphone. The mic can't be this way.
But it should pick you up if you speak loudly.
Great, so we're all gonna take turns at our table presenting, so I'm going first. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about equity in terms of, beyond just like ADA accessibility, really thinking about physical, emotional, intellectual equity for different types of students and learners. That there's potentially spaces within the building that both provide, but, comfort and closeness and then expanse at the same time. We talked about really connecting the building to educational and curriculum opportunities. So thinking about, windows into spaces, wall sections, how the site interconnects, if there's rainwater reuse, exposed piping, but really championing the teachers to help, integrate that into the science programs, things of that nature. We tapped Ed to say, what would a comfy classroom look like? And so acoustics and noise are important, especially, with the Pollard site. So thinking about that adjacency to the train and how we can think about both materials and nature. And what did I leave out?
I think you had
I
it.
think that's.
I think you had it.
Okay.
I can't keep track of all this stuff.
I've got it.
So was there more at that?
I think that's good.
Ready, let me write that down. So we can go to the next section.
Not
Cooperating.
it's a little.
No. I've got the large house study. Oh, okay, good luck with that. Control tear down. Yes,
Okay, you should be good now.
All right, great. So the next,
Good luck, Ed.
the next area of focus is on resource and so there are a lot of different ways to be thinking about this, not only as a material, but it's also how the spaces and buildings are designed. So the more efficient you can be with your spaces, either in overlapping uses or being as compact on the site as you can while still fulfilling all of these other desires is important to try to keep in mind. Next. So on the material side, we're always trying to specify healthy materials. Again, it helps on the indoor environmental quality for the occupants. And it can really help reduce exposure to toxins and help on the respiratory issues that many people are contending with. And choosing different materials, both from their environmental impact as something that's produced and put in the building, but also their longevity and how well they weather work. And that's another aspect of considering environmental impacts, the resources that we put into a project. And again, efficiencies, being as efficient as possible also allows us to be as efficient with the energy consumption that the buildings are using. And the more contained we can be on the site, the more actual site will be usable to do for other activities as well. And, you know, we're always trying to balance all of, and it's tough with these school projects that are large buildings, but we're always trying to balance as much passive strategies as we can to also help on the energy reductions. But all of this is an effort to balance the amount of materials and type of materials, how that impacts both health and energy consumption. So on the resource and economy side of things, the question here is, how can a project celebrate local materials and craft? So getting things sourced locally can be a benefit environmentally. And what are the priorities should be considered in material selection? So these are some things you guys can think about. There are some additional prompts on the tables to help get the thoughts going on it. Right, so I think it's good to start with the folks online. They might feel a little disconnected from the state, but stressful. Report out again.
We don't feel disconnected. We are here. We're on target here. Cameron, do you want to do the report out, or do you want me to take this one?
I can do my best. So we did talk a little bit about low carbon concrete for a bit. Ashanti had a lot of really useful information. And so she also talked about, you know, wood flooring versus carpets, which is something that, you know, I had never even really put a lot of thought into. But yeah, I mean, we were kind of, I don't think a lot of us have a lot of building expertise, but there were little, I think Ashanti was extremely valuable in providing some input there. And so I think we need to talk a little bit more to her about that.
Yeah, the one additional thing that I might add is that what we talked about, the friction in decisions, right, between like mass timber or steel and concrete. And so that we have operable windows or we have a tight building. And we didn't say one is good or bad, but there's a lot of decisions that have to be made over the course of this project. So
great. So primary one is low carbon products.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the same stuff, which is, you know, the emergence of low carbon, highly sustainable products like concrete and timber, which are increasingly available and priced at points that are better than they were, but also looking at the durability of products. So the balance between products that have more sustainability, but also have durability for a building for a long period of time. And so that balance of those two things, or they may often be in line, but there has to be choices sometimes made, you know, in that regard. So, and then disassembly, we discussed disassembly as well. So how do you take down a building ecologically? How do you reuse or repurpose or dispose of product that's been disassembled? Also is another part of the sustainability project. We talked a little bit about tree demolition. How would that impact if we were to rebuild on the site? Because on this site anyways, there's a significant tree canopy, and would that be favorable or not favorable? And they have a tree expert involved in this process, so that's another issue. And then we talk about plastics, and so how plastics is a big issue now. How is that being looked at in terms of not only sustainability, but elimination of products that could be unhealthy, especially for young people. And so that's changed over the years, and so we want to maximize our not using products that would be deleterious to human health, especially young kids, and plastics, microplastics, PFAS, and other chemicals that at least might be considered unhealthy. So that was sort of in summary what we thought. So,
Great. No, those are great. You guys have some additional?
We just quiz Matt on what the spec standards were. It said, yes, that's.
I think we said a lot of the same things in terms of understanding, low carbon free, where that timber can be used. Then we spent a little time talking about, how do you bring in some of the softer materials that give a site a building character, doesn't make it feel institutional. The challenges of those, both in terms of cost, in terms of, and I put it just like, it's hard to get the fire marshal to allow you to put almost anything on a wall, right? Which I find appalling, but we just have a big white wall that's noisier. So, what are the things we can do? And then the sustainability of the materials or the lifetime of the material, easy to clean, easy to use. I mean, carpets certainly feels off the bed. I don't pull it all in, but wood feels nice, but carpets have to be blown into a place regularly. And then, off. So just sort of thinking about sustainable, how we create a more welcoming site with materials beyond the more structural materials site.
Good. Figure out how to sum this up. You guys want to talk about?
Sure. So we talked about a lot of those other things, especially flexibility, assembly, disassembly, but spent a lot of time looking at the idea of local, and what do local materials mean, and even the concept that, I think people in Needham would take an expansive approach to local, so if we're getting wood from New Hampshire or upstate New York, most people will see that, it might not meet the AIA's definition of local, but we would think of it as local, regional approach to materials and things that fit within what we look like. Miss anything, Brad?
No. Since the other thing we did talk about was flexibility. Flexibility of the spaces within the building over time, so we can adapt. And if necessary, grow or be adjusted as the program changes. And the potential for expansion through the school. And I think the architect, Tiles and art.
I think that's the name of it. There's a Massachusetts brick manufacturer that's been in business for many years.
Also, it's in all favors. Yeah.
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 Their water struck bricks are part of my patio after being reused from my neighbor's tear down.
Those are great. We can move on to the next.
So I think a couple questions about this.
Yes, water ecosystem, and we were talking about it before this session started, but Massachusetts does deal with droughts in the desert community, so we're don't always have the rainfall that we need when we need it. So this is just representing what some of that is. You guys are very well aware of your connection to the Charles River, and there are a lot of environmental issues with that. So it's not just, whether you have it or don't have the water, it's also how much water are you dealing with on site and where is it going to? So it's typically going to the Charles River. And what is it taking with it as it goes to the Charles River? So those are all the overlapping things from a site perspective on water. Go to the next slide. So still thinking about the site and what we're trying to accommodate. And we still want plants on site and what can happen, and understanding what their maintenance needs are and how they can take advantage of natural rainfalls and how they can with that filtering aspect of what's going to the river, and how they can help slow down what's going to the river. So they're an important thing to be thinking about in this theme of water and on site. At the same time, we're trying to think about water consumption reductions, and every community is a little different on how they get their water here in Massachusetts. So some are tied to MWRA, some not, and what that means to them and how much they pay for it is all a factor that goes into thinking about, you know, how they want to address this. So we've done stormwater reuse systems on schools where we're collecting the stormwater and reusing it both to flush toilets and to irrigate areas of the property. And on one project, we actually got composted toilets, and so they did not have as much water being used for.
Was that 100% in the toilets?
Yeah, it was most of the toilets in one of the buildings. It was a vocational school that had multiple buildings, and their new science building put in composted toilets. And they're an ag school, so we kind of felt like, and they were on board with understanding what that means and didn't freak them out. The same way it might freak others out, but that does more to reduce water consumption than a stormwater reuse. But it requires space, you know, considerations. So.
Before you leave that one, you should just be aware that here in Needham, we are now using metal trays everywhere. And they are basically taken off-site, collected, washed, and returned to us in a large facility. And so, you know, that's how we're addressing that. That you put it up there.
So it's cool. So composting programs and how you deal with food service.
Composting is also.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing to be thinking about. And, you know, an outside service, and when you're building a new facility, do you want to create something in the new facility that takes care of what may be using as an outside service, or do you want to keep using the outside service because it works on other levels? So that's just another part of the.
So here's basically all the trays to all the schools, go to one place. Right, so that would, you know, and our challenge has always been in school buildings is the amount of kitchen space available for, you know, food preparation for other stuff. So you can also reduce the amount of space you need, and dishwashers and notoriously fitting.
Yeah.
Thanks. Powerful.
And from a material resource point of view, waste is another thing that we're dealing with, and use of waste. It's great. So, activity question: how can the design help people to become more aware and connected with the project's place in the regional ecosystem? So it's a broad range question, but we're really focused on the water side of it. But think about that. We'll spend about 8 minutes thinking and come back and try to write it all down. Okay, how do you know? We're gonna pause again and report out from the online folks.
And so how?
So sure, which one of you is volunteering to share what you guys talked about?
Sorry, we're not done.
I'm going to share the discussions results from my group. We have a whole discussion on the bioswales. We can have a lot of amazing things like bringing by the green infrastructure on the ground, like rain gardens, pollinator gardens, instead of like a huge cost and maintenance issues of hard piping. But this is also a balance of how the cost and between the cost and the maintenance. And also we have a discussion on the systems to capture water for irrigation. And we think we need to do more research on the rules of Needham, how to reuse the water, and also the possibility of collecting everything on site.
Great.
Yeah, okay, so we basically reiterated all those points about the types of things that would need to be done. We talked a little bit about the composting, toiletry because of as was mentioned, that's a huge cost for, water usage. Would that be something that would be feasible in Needham, even if it wasn't complete? It would be different. And also there might be limits in terms of what, could be feasible for space and for health codes. But that certainly came up. And then the ability to create storage facilities for rainwater and resiliency as water over time becomes more of a commodity. So that in the future, when obtaining fresh water for whether it be drinking or for irrigation, how can we create a system that could be built upon and expanded in the future? So that it would be able to have more storage either locally or with surrounding areas where capture can also occur. And so in that way, creating not only resiliency for now, but being prepared for the future, which will look different than it does now. So that's sort of in summary what we said.
Good.
All right.
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Really sad. I was talking about rain gardens and how that could also be integrated educationally. Students actually instructing them and learning how they operate. We also talked about composting and asked whether it was feasible to be able to compost all the feed waste on site. There may or may not be an opportunity, that when the whole design phase to do that. We also had some discussions on green roof and the solar roof and whether it would be a trade-off or we could have both or how that would actually work. We also talked about porous pavement, talked about some pros and cons. We also talked about the need for having plantings and landscaping that would be similar to what is in the surrounding environments or wherever possible. I know we're looking at a lot of limited space to a lot of things. Those are some of the hierarchy. I guess anything.
The only thing we didn't talk about, but I agree feel strongly, is trying to maintain as much of the existing tree canopies that we already have, depending on which site we end up on, depending on how we approach each site. One site, we would have to take out a lot of trees, and I would probably want to add a few trees. And just thinking about that in terms of impact on a neighborhood. I don't know who's the gentleman that does the, how many trees got cut down in Eden.
Yes, what you wanna know?
No, I'm just saying, like, somebody tracks how many trees we cut down in Needham, 2 on this street, 5 on that street, 10 on this street. I think if we thought about that relative to one of the 2 sites, there would be a large number on this list of how many trees we're gonna move down on a site to do that school, so I think we should.
Losing the canopy equals really.
Oh, yeah, no, everything about it, If you think about what's happening in the neighborhood with all those trees, it's. When they're not there, someone's gonna be really surprised at what it looks like.
Most of it was said.
Yeah, I think the one, maybe the overarching thing we felt that was the idea of showing the infrastructure, showing the stormwater, it's hidden away, so show and celebrate what we're doing with the water and maybe use it as a teaching tool, but also, just sort of Letitia was saying, like the watching a broken downspout and, in a heavy rain storm, kids can see that water, you know, and connect to the outside, and that distracts them from calling on us or whatever. You know, to really build that connection to what we currently kind of way. And find ways to use it as just teaching tools and tools. Maybe a system.
I mean, it actually goes back to what you use of the brain group. I mean, there are ways. I really want to go down that path. You could actually show students how water runoff from a plain roof has a certain amount of XYZ in it, and water that comes through the green roof is far cleaner, and what that means as it moves into the water system. You know, it's more work to do that, but if you did a very concentrated area where you can show them the difference of what happens, I think it would be very.
I think that's great. I love great groups. And I think something like that, not only educating the students. If you had something like that that was exploring possibilities, you might even be able to engage some higher ed institutions that are looking at it.
Yeah.
Might want to study it as well.
Yeah.
So it can be part of a broader learning.
We actually did it out at WPI. We did palleted roofs, and the other thing that we did was that they would plant chives and other things on the roof, and then they would take the pallets down and they would use it in the food. And the students knew that the chives that they were eating or the vegetables they were eating that had grown up on the roof, which was also kind of fun, just as a group.
Facilities like Lofty's, which that grow with the brook. Yeah, they're nice. And the parents have- So there are.
Oh, yeah. No, it's just somebody else just.
We're gonna try to get. Sorry. We can set no.
Yeah, but we have incorporated.
We're loaded with no. That might come down a little bit.
All right.
That's.
Big, on to the. Next activity. Which I think we kind of led into a little bit in this conversation, discovery and change, so, you know. A lot of these overlap each other in some ways, so flexibility we talked about on the material side and resource efficiency side, but it also allows for, a lot of different things to take place, and, discovery is another important, we're in a school environment for one, but there's any building where your occupants can discover new things about themselves and or what they are there doing is great thing to support. And some of the conversation we just had about stormwater and what we're really trying to do there relates to this. So we have an example with a rain chain, and you can see how the water gets down into a certain part near the entrance of the building. We do integrate a lot of graphics, signage in our buildings, and this middle example is showing part of the mechanical systems with overlaying graphics on glass, so they kind of understand what they're looking at, so it's not just the machines and what it's all about. So I think that's another important aspect of what we try to bring, and I think it's also an important thing to hear from the community as to what they want to be sharing with the occupants. These are some other examples of graphics, either kind of telling a story and a theme, and this can help with both identity and community within the school, so smaller cohorts kind of being identified with different spaces in the building and identified by graphics, and also using it as a learning vehicle to impart some knowledge about something. So with that in mind, question is how can this project be designed for adaptation to anticipate future uses and change in labor markets? I'm not really sure what that really means, but I think the labor markets is more about what will the students, you know, what do they need to learn? You know, how will the educational delivery need to kind of anticipate changing situations in the world growing up?
Rory.
Down.
All right, we're calling you back now.
And maybe Brayden.
You want to do it,
So-
Ajay?
Or
Online folks, Somebody else gonna take turn?
Yeah, I can do this time. So we talked a little bit about using the building as an example for kind of showing how a building works by maybe having like a little snippet in the wall so that kids can kind of see all the different layers of the plumbing, the wall, the insulation, all of that. And then another point you brought up was solar panels. I think there's some schools that have canopies over their parking lots with solar panels, and with solar panels, even separately from just a canopy, you can kind of teach students how those work by having a little diagram or something like that, and kind of using the building as a way to teach students about the things that are going on was kind of the main thing that we talked about.
I might just jump in and add, we also not only talked about the building, but we talked about the process and collecting data about why and why not different decisions were made for future projects, just so that the community can understand why decisions were made. Maybe we can tie costs to certain decisions. So we did talk about the value of the storytelling of the process as well.
Thank you. Mr. Pitt.
Yeah, so we agreed with everything you just said, which is to say that there's tremendous educational value in the process about how this happens. And then once it's here, the building continues to offer educational value to the students and teachers, because you can create a curriculum that blends the sustainability and environmental benefits of the building to their actual curriculum, especially in science. And that it would be attractive to the kids because they could actually see it and do it, and would make science more relatable. And as opposed to science turning off some kids because it's taught in a dry manner. So that really what we said in general is that how can you create a theme for their stay here at Pollard, which is the overall theme of their stay here for 2 years is based on an environmental and sustainability theme. And that the teachers teach along those lines, which means they have to know all the parts of what the building can do and not do. And then that becomes integrated into each part of the curriculum that the students engage in. And so if we can do that at every step of the way and measure those things, which would be terrific. It's going to be complex, but AI could probably play a role in that. I think that would be make this a unique educational experience because of the uniqueness of the building that will come out. So that's what we thought.
Yeah.
Is that sort of some?
Paul said a magnet school for sustainability, which is such a neat idea. We think about all of these other different types of magnet schools and leveraging what we already have to measure for code and thinking and just like broadly thinking, what else would folks even like to measure in the building, and how could that be further tied to curriculum?
Great, cool.
That's great. Next week.
The ocean. The old ocean.
Oh, I'm into the water.
Flexible. I started. That was well, it's the most important thing I think of. Is space needs to be helped, so it can flexible for because of the other education's gonna look like in 20 years. So it's just that is the most important thing, not building boxes and permanent structures that you can't change. Which you don't want to do in a way that makes it look like a Quonset hut. You're just putting a temporary partition as a design challenge. But how to do that? To do that kind of work. But I think it's extremely important. We've got one example there of a classroom. To think about the flexibility, it's not just that you might have a larger classes, but you can bring 2 classes together by opening a partition. Right, to teach 2 groups of kids at once, in a sort of joint session. You need that kind of flexibility in current education as well as we don't know what is coming down the road. So that probably really will. We did talk about other things relation to that. We were talking about the solar canopies as well. That's been my thing for a while. Again, the idea that you could essentially have parking spaces do not have to be, the cars are protected, you don't have to sand or snow or plow them if you have full cabinets. Do that, that would be absolutely terrific. That's an important part of, design for discovery and change.
They should have forest favors.
Sorry.
Could have forest favors.
Or you could have forest favors.
Combine those two things.
And I'll come back to that picture you showed, because I think that's absolutely terrific. Don't hide the systems in the building. I mean, we do that in every building. It's behind some locked door that you go in, you'll get eaten up or something. It's dangerous, which it is, but putting it behind glass, I mean, too many, we all grew up not really understanding where stuff, where's the water come from? Where does the waste go? Where does the electricity come from? Where's the heat come from? What a great opportunity to put it behind glass and, show what those systems do.
You're gonna turn the school into a Richard Scarry book.
Exactly. That's okay with me. Where the water comes from.
Thanks for me, yeah. I think they nailed it. Sustainable magnet.
I love the stamp, that's
You're
great.
like, you have to find that one special thing. Drive it through the whole conversation. I think that's a really, really good thing.
So other communities will come to see it.
That too, yes.
Yeah. About this last two.
I think we touched on a lot of these things, but the overall arching thing of storytelling, and Hank made a very good point to make it inescapable rather than a screen that you can look at to see the solar production, somehow have the building tell its story, or have the community, have some interaction so that it's, we're presumably collecting a lot of this data. Maybe we can collect more and then weave a tapestry electronically to change things or to show people.
Or competition.
Would
Well, yeah, that was,
one example might be the putting a sensor in every classroom, is that be?
Yep, that metering and make it. Was not only read by the students in the building, but parents could understand that the CO2 levels are within range. And maybe that's too much reporting.
but you could show that, the walls could sort of be this gentle blue that sometimes gets a little bit gray, but it never gets dark gray because the air quality is good, something or poetic like that.
And really bringing that not only to the science classes, but to the art classroom. And how acoustics, teaching students what's happening with the acoustics in those special rooms and in the standard room. And the art side of it reminded me of not only permanent paintings on the wall, but then changing in light and how that brings some of these systems into educational process.
Which we didn't really discuss, but the notion that that sustainability is not just a science topic, that if we make the building, once again, make the building speak to us.
I think that's huge because if you take that to the programming stage. Everybody talked about this building being focused on STEM and hands-on learning and engineering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because that's my recollection. It's like we kept coming up in every conversation about hands-on learning. STEM to STEAM. I think the more we do that, the more it hits sort of that original big vision of the project.
Question for the architects, I guess, so. Eden is well known. Because it's their overseas, sort of exploring that built a little bit in terms of adopting the different building challenge for building in schools that have tried to go down that road. One up, what's the living building? If you could explain that. North in this.
It's another certification system like LEED. It was started by people that used to be part of USGBC and didn't think that they were far enough, so they went farther. It's extremely challenging to be a living building certified project, but they do have. You can achieve petals in the living building challenge, so you can decide, hey, we can't do all of this stuff. You know, so like one thing, since we've been talking about water, you can't bring any potable water on site. You have to collect all the water that you're gonna use and use it within, and you've got to clean it and reuse it. And the only potable water that they allow is for fire protections. So that's one of the challenges with a living building. So there are some living buildings in Massachusetts. Hampshire College has one. So you can go see. But, and they typically have composting toilets.
So this might be along the same lines, but I had forgotten to ask about passive heating and cooling systems. Is that a part of a LEED certification? Or is that a little different?
Well, it's rolled into the energy performance. So when you can take advantage of passive strategies, theoretically, you can reduce your energy consumption, get that, credit related for that. So it's rolled into the energy side.
Can you roll back to that though, because isn't there? Can't you peel out like the wellness, the one that's sort of the wellness pedal that's not necessarily a building design pedal? And
I think you can choose.
not that you're gonna get,
Yeah, I think you
Yeah,
can choose.
like an LBC building in its
Right.
totality, but I think if as a group, we actually looked at the pedals and said, of all of them, this is the one that means something to us, and it's like,
And you may be-
well-being and whatever, and
You may
that
find it, you
is-
can get. Because,
Yeah.
you're already doing a lot of stuff relative to a sustainable building.
Right. But if you guys are doing a green school to begin with, and it's energy efficient, and we do solar, and we do all these other things, and you pick the best materials, and I feel like I wouldn't wanna just give the whole thing up, like for I would personally like to see a well school versus a lead school, because I feel like you guys are gonna do the lead silver no matter what. Based on the envelope and everything you're doing, and I feel like perhaps the compromise would be to look at a well certification. We might not be able to do multiple pedals and.
I think that's a great idea, and I think it's everything developed, setting a owner's project requirements document. Being really clear about what the goals are. We talked about even material hierarchy, understanding what is a basis of design versus where you want to push. That's really helpful, because if you keep coming back to that, as design decisions are made,
I mean, if you really think about our students right now. We talked about, we don't want plastics in the building. Yes, absolutely. But, can we take it one step further, the whole sort of wellness circle, see?
So there's different
It's the
levels.
daylighting, it's the views, it's the materials, it's interior air quality. It's the whole thing, right? And creating the learning.
I think that's great. I think it's pushing the envelope a little bit and trying to look at things a little more holistically, just great. I think understanding the differences between well certification, the building challenge pedals would be part of the conversation now, right? To know which one is the right fit.
Yeah, no, I just feel like we should look at all of it and just sort of say, again, if this is the sustainability magnet. Or maybe
Yeah.
it's a wellness magnet, or maybe it's a something magnet, I don't know, but I feel like. Due diligence, we should sort of look at all of them and say, where do we wanna? Where do we wanna check that box and say, that's the special quality of this product?
I feel like achieving silver is required. MSB is required silver, so that's kind of fair, but at the same time, how much of it is really redundant to them?
Well is a little different.
Yeah.
Well has different requirements that go into things that have to be measured and measured on an ongoing basis. So that's one of the differences. And that may be what you want to do, with what you want to do. So that's part of that conversation.
So, but it's worth looking at, because also I think when you think about, I would love to sustainability and wellness. Well, whether you get whether to be connected, because that's actually what important to make people, that these two things are interconnected. Yeah, if you're healthier, if you're sustainable, more sustainable, if you're healthy. And I think that will be appealing to people in the community because, you know, you care about the energy, you care about the cost of the building. You also care about the health of the kids and people in the community. Yeah, I think that's a great way to follow the,
But the thing that ties into what you said about wellness, though, is that the number one issue, morbidity wise, in the healthcare climate area is not like respiratory, it's not cardiac, it's anxiety and associated with this disorder or this problem. And so if you have a building where everyone is sort of aligned, what kids see, you know, what's going on in the world, can be combated by what happens here. And so one way to relieve that anxiety, or to eliminate it, or move it aside, is to see where teamwork and process is made, moving in the right direction. And so the act of creating this process can relieve one of the major problems that these kids are gonna be dealing with as they come up through the system and as the world goes as it may. They're gonna need that, and this place might be able to provide that too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Cool. Okay. Keep moving on. One more topic to cover. Energy and integration. So this has been kind of running through the conversation, like a lot of these things do. There's a lot of terminology that's in this. We're not going to go into all of this, but it all plays into understanding energy consumption, renewable energy, meeting the requirements for rebates and stuff like that. So we'll just keep going through this. So and you guys kind of understand this. Energy is associated with carbon emissions, trying to reduce this, and we are pushing to keep reducing energy consumption in our buildings. And I think the partnership with Mass Save and their efforts to reduce energy consumption is going a long way for all of us to be meeting these goals. And so this is just over time, we could see that, you know, as our office has been working on this, buildings keep getting lower in line, which is great. It's what we want to keep doing. And the utilities are incentivizing that threshold. So for middle schools such as yours, a 25 EUI is the target to hit. We'll have other conversations about UIs and stuff like that as it goes into design, but understanding that is also impacted by schedule. So getting a handle on your building schedule is going to be important to understanding your EUI targets and whether you meet them stuff. So that's just a future conversation. So as was brought up, you know, passive systems can help understanding the choices in mechanical systems and how they're efficient based on how the building's going to be used is another aspect that we'll be digging into as the project gets designed. And you know, again, sort of that feedback loops. How's the building commissioned during construction? How's the maintenance continued throughout the project to keep that energy performance an ongoing thing? You don't want to kind of design it one way and then never really get that efficiency as you use it. So that's always a challenge. You guys haven't gone through your climate action plan, understand the efforts to mitigate the too much carbon atmosphere. Trying to get away from that. This is also, I think many of you understand this too, the life cycle impacts and the correlation between embodied and operational carbon. So as buildings become much more energy efficient, the embodied carbon is becoming a more important aspect of what everyone's considering. It's being reviewed in updated codes. So people are considering it being a code requirement to track some of this for certain materials. And they're looking at it from, in some ways, an energy point of view. So it's like the International Energy Code is looking at this. It's being incorporated into their language. So even though it's impacting materials that you might not normally associate with energy consumption of those. So we've also talked about the solar canopies, using this teaching tool. It's a vegetative group at another school where they're the same room had the compost toilets, has students grow different things on the roof. So they're using it as a teaching tool. So that's the kind of dual purpose of multiple purposes. Green roofs can provide a lot of those impacts that we've already talked about. Good. So this activity is to what design strategies can provide multiple benefits that meet social needs of the community, economic goals of the project, and environmental needs of the site. So it's kind of rolling a lot of what we've been talking about already. So it's a chance to reflect on that a little bit more, and maybe thinking about energy consumption at the same time.
Like the last.
On-site generation of energy.
Sorry, we got everyone back.
Yeah.
August Middle High School.
All right, so we're wrapping up this one. Online, whose turn is it now? The share out.
I'm gonna go on this one. So, we talked about the importance of, when we're thinking about the interior environment, really striking that balance of the amount of glass and the amount of view relative to daylight, as well as the effect on like how the building is loaded. So, if we're talking about solar heat gain, when is it beneficial? When is it, potentially costing money to mitigate? So trying to strike that balance so that, we're gaining the benefits of the passive effects, but, not causing us to have excessive load in certain spaces, again, depending on orientation and, the depth of the mass and all that. We talked about how, things like deciduous trees on a western exposure could be advantageous in that we're, blocking the sun when it's hot, falling across the west, but then the leaves fall off in the winter, and then we're sort of gaining solar gain that wouldn't have otherwise been there if we had, evergreens or some sort of wall in the way. We touched on heat island effect a little bit, that's sort of external to the internal environment, but in a way, hot asphalt is miserable. And then we talked a little bit about, in terms of the use of the building, the importance of zoning it correctly so that singular spaces don't trigger large systems to have to operate. Particularly when we're in those modes or times where, certain spaces are getting used, but not really wholesale occupancy. And then, in thinking about natural ventilation, we touched on how bad the pollen is here in New England and, the need to actively manage operable openings, particularly during those times, as well as when it's really cold out, so that we don't run the risk of freezing anything.
A lot. That's great. Yeah.
So we didn't have anything quite as, I personally didn't have anything as detailed as that, except that we thought about how we could achieve not just net zero, but net positivity with as many possible sources of energy, including geothermal, parking canopies for the teachers, loading up on solar. We wouldn't be able to create a solar farm per se, but we could use solar on parking canopies. We mentioned integrated PV systems, which would be expensive. And we talked a little bit about battery storage, all of which were meant to create resiliency within the system so that, that it would be self-sufficient and potentially profitable if it were able to produce energy. So those were some of the ideas that we talked about. Anything else?
Gary, Paul may be interested in the Trigen system.
Okay.
Speaking of resilience. Yeah.
We can talk about that.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. I'm gonna look it up tonight.
Very good.
I just out of the room, so I didn't even hear what was.
So we said everything they said.
Yeah, everything, yeah, what you said.
Sorry, they don't know.
Then positive, yeah.
Voting for net zero, making this part of the way you use the building. The request for open amendments.
Question of whether you could use the waste heat ground source heat pump system to melt the chemical party.
I like the snow melt stuff. I've always wanted to have a better idea of, even though that takes a little energy to do, is that environmentally better than all the de-icing and everything that you have to do to maintain safe entry to a building. So you wouldn't do snow melt across the site, but maybe around the perimeter of the building, it might be something worth considering. So there's an energy impact, but there's potentially an environmental benefit, potentially a maintenance reduction. So it's just something to think about. It's something that could be studied to evaluate whether it does peak some. There are places that do have. Okay. Steve?
Much of it has already been said. I think in terms of integration and energy, we did talk about how solar canopies not only have the energy production capacity, they are an educational tool. They help divert water into the stormwater. In other words, it keeps rain off of the parking lot. And it also helps in terms of snow protection. You will lessen the amount. So the solar canopies, even though they can be very expensive, they have multiple layers of opportunity, particularly in an educational setting. And it also would help lower the heat island of the facility.
And the water runoff benefits.
Yes.
Clean water runoff.
Yes, clean water runoff.
The other thing that the question of net zero. We didn't dive too deeply into it, but the notion of using offsite solar, as part of the town's program and feeding, virtually feeding the school. Whether from purchased solar or if we're building that solar elsewhere.
It's been great. Yeah, I spent a lot of thought, energy, probably feeling a little tired from it, but I hope you got some fun, energetic ideas. So, I think we're gonna wrap it up, but, two things. Not sure how we'll do this for folks online, but maybe Kelly can work on it with them. We have some stickers, so as you're leaving, you can kind of use a sticker, 3 different colors, to vote on of all of these, which one might be your most important priority out of all, so it'd be hard to decide, but you might pick the one we spoke about, but choose, 1, 2, and 3, and Connor will tell you what color represents which choice.
Yeah, let me go find that out.
And then the other thing is, everyone could use the same app There's a QR code, it's on the sheets that you have. To kind of reflect on what we've talked about as a whole and, you know, whether you have different thoughts now than when you started, so we're just interested in seeing whether we move the needle at all and move back. So you can do that at your leisure, but it's online. We'll want to scan it before we go. So online, Kelly, if you could get from folks, some of what they might think was their higher priorities out of all of them written down, but I don't know if you have all of them written down, so let us know if you need any help with that.
No, I have notes and we can have a quick 2-minute, but I hope that our online folks had also scanned the code for Menti. So throw us into a Zoom room for perhaps 2 minutes or so.
We don't vote, right?
Thank you.
And just to note that we can't end the meeting until we formally adjourn, so
Right, so should we-
don't leave after you do the stickers, because you will have to adjourn the meeting.
So once they get back from the Zoom,
Yeah.
we will formally adjourn.
Yeah,
Right, and then they can do the stickers on their way out.
One thing, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. Scheduled in my life.
Okay, so.
Monday nights is for delay.
We don't formally adjourn. So,
Yeah.
It's getting a little, just, you know, we're kind of falling, the order's falling apart, but,
formally
Yep.
adjourn the meeting.
So we just need to formally adjourn, so everyone could just take a seat really quick, and Nick will need a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn?
Motion to adjourn the climate action committee.
Okay,
Hi,
Paul,
hi.
Michael,
Aye.
Fred? Erwin,
Yes.
Paul, and the chair votes aye, and thank you all for coming.
thank you.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Sorry.